The drama surrounding this fight did not begin when the bell rang. It began long before the fighters ever stepped into the ring, before the cameras rolled, before the crowd found their seats. There was a strange tension hanging over Japan that day, the kind you can't quite explain but can feel in your chest. News traveled fast through the arena corridors. Someone had fallen down the stairs the day before. An earthquake had rattled the region earlier, and there was an unshakable sense that the ground itself was restless. It felt like the country was holding its breath. When fans finally poured into the venue, they didn't come casually. They came alert, eyes wide, senses sharp, ready for something momentous. And in a way, they were right. This was not just another bout. This was Tsuyoshi Kosaka, a pioneer of Japanese mixed martial arts, a man whose career spanned generations, stepping into an open-weight Grand Prix against Baruto, an Estonian colossus whose presence alone bent the atmosphere around him. On paper, it looked like a mismatch. In reality, it felt like a test of something deeper. Pride versus physics, legacy versus inevitability, belief versus brute force. The crowd buzzed as familiar faces appeared on screen. Kid Yamamoto sat cage side, watching intently, his gaze locked on the ring. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't chatting. He knew what was at stake. Legends recognize moments that echo beyond the immediate result, and this was one of them. Around him, fans leaned forward in their seats, gripping armrests, whispering predictions, but mostly just waiting for impact, waiting for the unknown. The rules were announced with clarity that bordered on ominous. 2 rounds of 5 minutes, with a possible third if needed. Knees and kicks to the head of a grounded opponent were legal. Elbows were not. These were not modern, sanitized rules. These were old-school, unforgiving regulations that rewarded pressure, size, and the willingness to endure pain. It was the kind of rule set that made veterans uneasy and giants dangerous. When Tsuyoshi Kosaka entered, the reaction was emotional. This was a man Japan had grown up watching. He was not just a fighter. He was a symbol of an era when MMA was raw, experimental, and brutally honest. At 46 years old, he was no longer the physical force he once was, but he carried something heavier, history. Every step he took toward the ring carried memories of wars fought in rings and cages across the world. Then Baruto emerged. The mood shifted instantly. Baruto didn't need theatrics. He didn't need to shout or gesture. His body did all the talking. Nearly 400 pounds of disciplined mass moved toward the ring with surprising calm. This was not a sloppy heavyweight. This was a former sumo wrestler, a man who had spent his life learning balance, pressure, and how to impose his weight on another human being. When he climbed through the ropes, it felt like the ring itself shrank. The fighters stood across from each other, and the contrast was staggering. Kosaka looked focused, determined, but realistic. Baruto looked unreadable, as if he were preparing to perform a task rather than fight a man. When the referee gave final instructions, the crowd went silent. Even the air felt heavy. Then the bell rang. There was no feeling-out process, no cautious probing. Baruto exploded forward immediately, closing the distance in a way that defied logic for a man his size. The first knee came out of nowhere, driven upward with terrifying force. It landed clean, and the effect was instant. Kosaka dropped to his knees, as if the floor had disappeared beneath him. The sound of impact echoed through the arena, a dull, sickening thud that silenced the crowd in a single moment. This wasn't just a strike. It was a statement. Kosaka had taken hard shots before. He had been knocked down, cut, battered, and bloodied over decades of competition. But this was different. This was mass multiplied by momentum, a collision that rattled his entire frame. You could see it in his eyes as he tried to orient himself, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. Baruto didn't hesitate. He followed him down immediately, positioning himself with the precision of a man who had done this his entire life. And then the knees began to fall. Each knee was heavy. Not fast, not flashy, but devastating. Baruto lifted his leg, turned his hip, and dropped it straight down again and again. From cage side, commentators struggled to find the right words. One described it perfectly: blunt force trauma. That was exactly what it was. No finesse, no trickery, just the relentless application of weight and gravity. Kosaka tried to move, tried to find space, but there was none. Being underneath Baruto was like being pinned under a fallen wall. Every attempt to shift his hips or post on an elbow was met with another knee or a shift of weight that crushed the air from his lungs. The crowd watched in stunned silence as a legend was slowly smothered by inevitability. The referee hovered close, watching carefully. Baruto wasn't inactive. He wasn't stalling. He was working methodically, legally, and with frightening patience. There was no reason to stand them up. Kosaka was absorbing damage, and Baruto was delivering it at a pace that felt almost merciful, and that somehow made it worse. From the commentary booth, the reality became impossible to ignore. Each knee landed with a sound that could be felt as much as heard. It wasn't explosive. It was deadening. The kind of impact that doesn't excite a crowd, but drains it. Fans winced. Some looked away. Others leaned in closer, unable to believe what they were seeing. Kosaka tried to sit out, to scramble, to do anything that might change the position. But Baruto adjusted seamlessly, lowering his grip, controlling the abdomen, pressing his weight downward. The Estonian giant looked like he was moving furniture, not fighting a man. The disparity was almost cruel. When Kosaka finally managed to create enough space to stand, the referee intervened and brought them back to their feet. It should have been a relief. Instead, it looked like a sentence. Kosaka stood unsteady, eyes unfocused, breathing heavy. Baruto looked exactly the same as he had at the opening bell. Calm, composed, ready. Baruto clinched immediately, pulling Kosaka toward him like a child. Knees followed, slamming into the body and head with brutal efficiency. Punches came next, short and heavy, delivered not a knockout but to break down. The corner trapped Kosaka, and there was nowhere to run. The openweight Grand Prix had stripped away illusions, leaving only reality. At one point, Baruto shrugged Kosaka off with a single arm and tossed him aside. The motion was casual, almost dismissive, and it drew an audible gasp from the audience. This wasn't dominance built on speed or timing. This was dominance built on inevitability. Big brother strength, the kind that makes resistance feel pointless. As the final second of the round ticked away, Baruto landed one more thunderous knee that seemed to echo through the building. When the bell finally sounded, it was almost a relief. Kosaka returned to his corner looking battered, disoriented, and exhausted. Baruto returned to his corner, looking like a man who had just finished warming up. Replays told the story in brutal clarity. Kosaka landed a right hand early, a flicker of hope that reminded everyone why he was there. But that moment was erased instantly by the knee that followed. Baruto lifted him, dropped him, and controlled him like a rag doll. The commentators didn't sugarcoat it. This was scary. 100-pound leg crashing into a forehead again and again with ease. Between rounds, the conversation turned honest. What do you tell a man in Kosaka's position? How do you adjust when your opponent feels less like a fighter and more like a force of nature? Logic said Baruto should be tired. Physics said he couldn't maintain this pace. But reality disagreed. His conditioning was unreal. For a man pushing 400 pounds, he looked fresh, eager, dangerous. The second round began, and any hope of a dramatic shift faded almost immediately. Baruto closed distance again, secured the clinch, and took Kosaka down with frightening ease. Once on top, he did what he did best. Laid his weight down and refused to let it go. This was the wet blanket, the suffocating style that drains not just energy, but belief. Kosaka tried elbows, scraping them across Baruto's legs, trying to soften them, try and create damage that might matter later. He tried punches from the bottom, trying to remind his opponent that he was still there. But Baruto absorbed everything without concern. He passed guard slowly, deliberately, and began to work ground and pound. The referee demanded action, and Baruto responded immediately, posturing up and landing punches. Even when his strikes were partially blocked by the ring ropes, it didn't matter. The weight alone was doing damage. The crowd watched as Kosaka's head pressed against the canvas under the sheer mass of his opponent. At one point, a takedown was so forceful that the referee nearly went down with them. The ring shook. Jokes were made about earthquakes, But the visual was sobering. This was controlled violence at its most primal. Kosaka continued to press forward whenever he could, refusing to surrender. With seconds left, he leapt in with an overhand right that landed clean. It was a reminder of who he was, a fighter who would not go quietly. Baruto barely reacted. He clinched immediately, pinned Kosaka in the corner, and finished the round exactly as he had started the fight, with pressure, knees, and complete control. When the bell sounded to end the second round, there was no suspense. The outcome was inevitable. Kosaka stormed his corner, frustration written across his face, throwing a punch in anger. He had taken this fight not just to compete, but to prove something, to honor Fujiya, to show that he could succeed where another had fallen. His heart was undeniable. His courage was unquestioned. But heart alone was not enough. As the decision was announced, the crowd responded with mixed emotions. There were boos, not because Baruto had done anything wrong, but because he had defeated a man they loved. Kosaka was more than a fighter to them. He was a memory, a connection to an era that shaped Japanese MMA. Seeing him dominated like this hurt. But there was respect, too, because what Baruto had shown was rare. A man at his size with elite conditioning, relentless pressure, and the discipline to execute a simple but devastating game plan flawlessly. This wasn't luck. This wasn't novelty. This was preparation meeting opportunity. As Baruto moved on to the semifinals, the implications of the fight lingered. This was not about speed or technique alone. It was about physics, about what happens when mass, conditioning, and confidence collide with experience and heart. On this night in Japan, under shaking lights and restless skies, Baruto proved that the Openweight Grand Prix is a place where legends are tested, illusions are stripped away, and reality can be brutally unforgiving. And yet, even in defeat, Tsuyoshi Kosaka reminded everyone why he mattered. He stepped into the ring against a human avalanche and refused to back down. He absorbed punishment that would have broken most men and kept moving forward. In a sport obsessed with winners, that kind of resolve still means something. The fight ended, but the story did not. Fans left the arena buzzing, debating, replaying moments in their minds. Some focused on Baruto's terrifying dominance. Others held on to Kosaka's courage. Together, those narratives formed something larger, a reminder of why fights like this resonate long after the final bell. Because sometimes MMA isn't about who is better. Sometimes it's about witnessing the collision of worlds. Legacy versus inevitability. Heart versus gravity. And on this unforgettable night, Japan watched it all unfold one thunderous knee at a time. If you enjoyed this deep dive, documentary-style breakdown, and want more long-form fight narratives that explore not just what happened, but what it meant, let me know in the comments. What did you think of Baruto's performance? And where does this fight rank among the most lopsided yet unforgettable matchups you've seen? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story we bring to life. In the end, this fight was never just about a win or a loss written on a tournament bracket. It was about confrontation between eras, between bodies built for different purposes, between what we hope is possible and what reality ultimately allows. Tsuyoshi Kosaka walked into that ring carrying decades of history, pride, and responsibility, representing not just himself but an entire generation of Japanese mixed martial arts. Baruto walked in carrying something else entirely, mass conditioning, and a style so unforgiving that it stripped the fight down to its rawest truth. What unfolded was harsh, uncomfortable at times, and impossible to ignore. Baruto did not overwhelm Kosaka with speed or technical brilliance. He overwhelmed him with inevitability. Every knee,